one of the things I would say is, because I edit it, we can just kind of go with it, right?
Okay.
So now we're hot. We're recording.
Okay.
All right. And I've started interviews and I forgot to hit record. So that's a big thing with this, is making sure you're on hot mic. So just for a refresher, KJ, can you do a mic check over there?
Check.
All right. So why don't you break us in? So this is Kicking It with KJ, and then we got KJ2, my man from Afghanistan, still at Beale, right?
Yes.
Right. Getting close to retiring.
Yes.
You're gonna retire, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna tell you, it's a beautiful life. People ask me if I miss it, and I'm like, no, not at all. But you had given me some topics. So before we do that, we got KJ, right? Cynthia,
Correct.
right? Charles. And I think he's going to be CB. Okay. And I think he might be quiet. He wasn't supposed to jump on, but he's on now, right? So we trying to trick them. So why don't you go ahead and take us in to how we got to, you're in Vegas and now you're in my studio.
Right.
But you got your folks here.
Right.
So this will be the first kind of KJ collaboration and bring lots of good energy, and you do it much better than me. So why don't you go ahead and take us away, man, on what you want to talk about and what brought you here?
Well, I mean, obviously what brought me here is, of course, us being in Afghanistan together. For those who are listening, KJ, the KJ, is Kevin James. He was my supervisor out in Afghanistan at Bagram Air Force Base. And great supervisor at that, been mentoring me ever since. I forget what year that was because it was so long ago, but several deployments ago. And now he's retired chief. And at that point, that's when I had just made tech and was kind of pushed out to that deployment after several other TDYs and trainings. And so it was a crazy deployment, but obviously from that, we get a respectful relationship.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so from that, you just fast forward to, I guess, the near present, where my mother, who has recently, and she'll tell you more about that, so I'm not going to take her thunder, but she is now considered an author, and she's going to be talking about her book. And when the idea of that came to fruition, I said, oh, well, since we'll be in Vegas, because that's something I kind of noted and wanted her to kind of do, take a break from the hustle and bustle of everything that she does for everybody. Then I realized, oh, hey, wait a minute, while we're in Vegas, Chief KJ is actually out there, so that would be a great because I'm trying to push her as well to get her book information and all that out there, since I know it's her first book, and so that's kind of how we got here. So we're kind of out here for a little vacay, with my parents and other family members, and just decided, hey, while we're out here, it'd be great if we can meet up with you and on air and try to get her to talk about her book a little bit, and yeah.
Okay. So before, I think we absolutely should have you just go into it, but I think there's a little bit of energy that's probably lacking from the table that I know will make this young man happy, right? So let's bring this guy. Let's bring this guy to the table.
Somebody has been listening.
Right. See, so.
Oh my gosh. That's perfect.
Okay. Yeah. So for those who are listening, he just put a Captain America,
a little baby
Captain America on the table.
Well, I think you were in a Captain America shirt yesterday.
I was. Yeah.
Okay,
had a whole get up. Yeah.
All right. Well, this is a very family friendly show. This episode will be. If you listen to my other content, it can get very non-family friendly. So, ma'am, please, Cynthia, author, book, if you want to introduce yourself to the audience, and kind of go with where KJ2, right, was headed. Should we do an applause thing? Oh, I'm glad I stopped that one. That one's not the applause. There we go. Hold on. There we go. That one is a prank one.
Oh, wow.
And it wouldn't be appropriate.
Okay.
Okay, man, please. The floor is yours.
Well, first I want to thank you for the opportunity. This is great, and thank you, KJ2, or affectionately known as Kenneth, my son, for setting this up for me. I am a new author, although I published a couple of other educational programs that I've done in the past, but this is my first book that I have written. and it was done strictly from my heart as a tribute and legacy to my parents, my mother, Eddie Mae McGee, and my father, Willie James McGee, who was 22 years in the Air Force and raised his family with a love and a passion to support us, his 4 kids, when I say us, and my mother, in a way during a very difficult time in his life or in the life of America. We were going through the middle to the end of the civil rights era, and Dad was raising us being in a very elite specialized part of the Air Force, was radar missile tracking engineering, and he was. We were always stationed in very remote areas of the country, so it was very difficult because there weren't a lot of people that looked like us in those very remote areas, and he gave all of my siblings and I such great lessons and gave us core values that we were able to sustain us during those times,
right.
and helping us to come to this place where, and I said in my book, where I'm the woman I am today because of the upbringing and the Christianity in the household that we had with my mother and my father.
Oh, that is awesome. So it's funny you just talked about like kind of like that pivot where the civil rights movement and stuff came in. So we were watching, so I have had Amazon Prime account forever.
Okay.
And it wasn't until my friend who has a 2nd grade education level, because mine's kindergarten level, said, hey, didn't you know you get Amazon Prime movies? So this is not to deviate. So there's a show that's the #1 series called Them. I don't know if you've heard about it. So
yes, I've heard about it.
Have you?
Mm-hmm.
And
watched it, though.
I can't, it's great.
Okay.
But I can't tell you how emotionally sick to the stomach when it reminds you of the history of our country.
Yes.
Right. And I was just like, oh, anyways, okay.
Wow.
Your book. But yeah, so we were watching it and I was like, oh my gosh. Like, yeah, I don't know. We could talk about that another day.
Yeah, no.
But you brought it up.
It's part of the book. I mean, it's part of
Okay.
what we, some of the things that were the outcomes of some of the tragic times in our country,
Right.
raising a family, a black family, in a very difficult time in the country. Well, we were coming near the end of the civil rights era with still some lingering issues, of which at the time I sat down to write this book, there was very much a part of that flashing forward to what we were dealing with today.
Right.
Flashing backward, rather. When I flashed back and started thinking about things we were dealing with, it was happening again in real time, right as I was typing this book, So
Yeah.
we had come a long way, and then we had taken a few steps backwards when you think about what we were going through at the time that I wrote this book. So
Yeah, and it's, you have to wonder like how social media, and media and technology has not necessarily benefit. There's always positives and negatives. There's always opportunities, threats, weaknesses, and and it's like you say it's like taking 2 steps forward, then you take 4 back.
yes,
You know what I mean? And then you have younger generations who
Yes.
don't really
Get it.
understand, or because I'd always, it's different. As far as like what someone may experience today is not necessarily the same it was experienced in the past. And then how do you bridge those gaps of saying you're saying that you experienced what I experienced, but it's nowhere close. And we've worked hard to overcome and keep moving forward, and you're actually helping regress. I don't know. I mean, it's a tough conversation, and social media and our ability to communicate, I think is actually, it has actually made it very clear on who the people like Martin Luther King is one of my, I love the guy. And I am the first to tell you, I'm like, I could have never done what he done. I mean, as soon as you threaten my family, I'm kind of like, ooh, you know what I mean? Should I go out here and say something knowing that my children are being threatened, or, they're throwing bombs on his porch, right? So if you've ever been to Montgomery or Selma and you've seen, toward the house, and, we have a world now where if you speak your mind, you're chastised regardless which way you lean, so interesting. So I think that's pretty awesome that you put out a book. I'm gonna tell you, you know what I mean? It's when you publish your thoughts and feelings, you're gonna have people who agree, people who disagree, people who say you're being a little too emotional, X, Y, and Z. And I experienced it when I started doing this, because I'm like, what do you mean? I love everybody, and you wouldn't believe the amount of people who just criticize you because they've taken something you wrote out of context or they've never walked in your shoes. So I think that is awesome. And I think it's something I'm going to need to read.
I would appreciate you reading it. The joy of writing this book is that no one can argue, take back, challenge the way I feel about my parents.
Right.
These are my feelings. I own them. There will be more probably challenges about grammatical errors or the way I wrote a sentence stating more than what is the content of this book. The content of this book is strictly from my heart, and that cannot be negated. It can't be challenged based on the love I have for my parents.
Absolutely.
Which was a safer route to go, to be honest with you, than
Right.
to talk about to get into the immediate challenges of what was going on in the world, more than how my father and my mother helped us navigate through that world. So, and they did the best that they did, and I think they did a wonderful job. Could it have been better? Sometimes, yes. Could Dad have pulled back on some of his non-negotiables? Maybe.
Right.
But the non-negotiables that he had and the support, the undeniable support my mother gave was what it took to get me to where I'm at to this day. So,
Right.
But I really didn't say who I was. My name is Cynthia McGee Burton, and my father is Willie James McGee. My mother's Eddie Mae Dotson, and when she married Dad, became McGee. So I wanted to put their names out there too,
Right.
to have them acknowledged.
Oh, you're good. Don't worry about it. We're live. There's no camera. You can do whatever you want.
Okay, sorry.
You can throw the headphones down and be like, I'm done. You can say, Kev, go turn that fan up because it's hot in here. In the summer, and usually these mics do good at blocking out the sounds. Usually we do it like really early or really late, so I do apologize. I did say I would share the story, all right, about this. So before we do that, so did you want to introduce yourself and make sure the folks know you, or no?
I will. Well, I'm CB, the husband of the author, the star of the show, supporting cast,
Right.
and biggest fan. So nothing else needs to be said about that because it's her time.
I dig it.
Yes, sir.
So, when you were parking, I was talking about how we got into this setup. So I got accepted into what's called Leadership Las Vegas. It's 32 years now. It's a chamber program, and I was the first chief master I never accepted to it while I was in the Air Force. And so that opened a lot of doors, and one of them was the network. They were like, hey, we're looking to interview people. And so I got an opportunity to be interviewed as a guest. And so the question will always come up, even for you is, all right, so what's next? You just wrote this book. Now what's next, right? Okay, I'm going to go do a podcast. All right, well, what's next? And so, and I sweat a lot, so thank God it's my equipment, right? Yeah. So I said, I don't know. I was going to write a book, and I'd started. But I hit writer's block, and there were some things that are in this vault that I just don't think I was ready to put out and expose about myself. KJ may have told you, like I said, I was 28 years Air Force. I did a lot of mortuary affairs in combat. Me and my team did the search and recovery of Thunderbird 4 here when it crashed. So I've had a lot of exposure to death, besides the mistakes I made when I was younger, to the times I was not a good parent not being around. So anyways, I was like, well, I always wanted to be a TV talk show host. Yeah. And they're like, well, why don't you do a podcast? And I was like, well, I don't have this stuff, and they're like, oh, well, you can just use our studio and come do a show in our studio. Well, long story short, it went from fee to fee in like record time, which put a bitter taste in my mouth because it was like, okay, I was a means to an end and you weren't transparent about that. And I'd already done like 2 shows and had 1 more lined up. And so me and my, KJ will probably tell you I am very, I can get very emotional and on my thoughts and feelings. I just don't hold back. I said I don't have a filter. Yeah. And so she's like, well, what do you want to do? Like, if you want to do it, then you need to get your own studio. So inside those doors is a family of 8 in this house, right? So I take care of my parents. So my parents live with me. And then 6 kids total, and the wife and me. So there's no room inside for a studio. So in the wintertime, you're freezing. in the spring and fall is perfect in here. And then as you get to the summer months, so I do apologize. If you're not hot and you're not, I am. So I'll be the only one who's uncomfortable. So anyways, long story short, I apologize for the heat inside here.
No worries.
Right. And I can always turn this down if you're hot in a week, and I think I'm going to do it anyways. So anyways, this ain't your show, CB. Right. But I'm going to make it a tad bit more intimate because I know this is bringing heat.
Okay.
And yeah, so do some talking
Okay.
about how what your mom was put in this book has influenced you, because we're going to talk about the book and there's a connection here, right? And I don't want to pull that up. What did you send to me that you said you wanted to talk about?
Oh, right. So it was so the book is so I've read the book, and I just was obviously floored, not surprised though, by many of the things that was in the book that my mother wrote. More so because there were obviously going to be things that I wasn't aware of. So for those not following, so again, I'm KJ2, legal name Kenneth Gene Johnson II, and the two members here, Charles Burton Sr., CB, and Cynthia Burton, the author, are in actuality my legal guardians and or foster parents, whichever one you want to choose. You would never hear that officially anywhere else, but just to stray from confusion. So I leaped into their lives at age 15, and KJ is aware of this story. Leaped into their lives at age 15, and with a horrid past with my biological parents and such, and they took me in, officially adopted me, and that's pretty much how we became family, right? So with that, there's obviously a lot that I didn't know, right? And my mother, who will probably be going into that a little bit more, does plan on writing more books in accordance to the what's next question, right? And but in this one, it had to do a lot with her parents, right? And so things that I wasn't really tracking with my granddad or my grandmother that of course I had time with before they both passed. And it was just great to hear the many things that they had done to raise this woman who I absolutely adore as my mother, and her siblings and the rest of the family that I just wasn't aware of. And so, but it was really outstanding because of the things that I heard that my grandfather, who he and I had a special bond as well. A lot of it, of course, having to do with the fact that, I was in the military, and he was just outstandingly proud of me for being in the military and for sticking with it. And, because he obviously you never know, right? Going in for a year, a couple of years, and he's like, "Go, keep going. And so every time I came back, we had this thing to where he would say, "Hey, let's meet for lunch and talk about what this base." Because usually I came home in between bases. It just made it easier. So for every time I came home, they know, okay, another base down. Where are you going next? Let's pray for that, and we'll see you the next time you come down for the next base or for the next holiday, whatever. So I usually came down for holidays or whenever I was in between bases. And so he'd always ask, "Okay, so what's next?" So that question, like, well, so what base is next? And it was just great. It was just great to have that time with him, and I'm glad I was able to have that time with him and my grandmother. But just knowing, what they were and how they influenced the family beforehand was just beautiful. And so this book really does bring that out in an extraordinary way. So I'm looking forward to what she has to write in the next one. I'm sure she'll go into that.
What was there? Because I know you sound like you had outstanding parents and a very close bond with them. And I know that influenced. How much did you raising KJ here though influence that as well? Was there kind of like a sandwich effect? Because you got to see, all right, this is how I was raised, and then I'm going to give myself to a human life. How is that influences on both sides?
It's when I was writing the book, I was also obviously thinking about my children and my parenting and, everything. Growing up with biological parents, all biological siblings, we were very, very tight. Our circle, our core you couldn't penetrate it. It was like we had life together as a family, and that's all we needed. So I had no experience as a parent on how to bring in someone outside into our circle. So when I got married to my husband, together we only had one biological son.
Got it.
And that's my youngest son. After we were together 6 months, a year and so, my oldest son, his older son, Charles Jr., came to our life. So I had another child that wasn't mine biologically that I was raising, and then my biological son, and then 7 years later, Kenneth comes into our life, and so we're raising somebody else's son yet again, and we're coming on. He has 15 years of life outside of our philosophy, core values, whatever we were bringing up our kids, that we had to massage and understand and deal with the pain that he was dealing with that, again, I had no experience with in terms of parenting.
Got it.
So it was trial by error, really was,
Okay.
with Kenneth. But because I had done, in terms of being a parent, but because I had worked so diligently and deeply into the community with being an advocate for youth,
Right.
I worked in the juvenile court community system, and I knew what it was like to deal with youth that had, dysfunctional, disgraceful, horrible backgrounds.
Right.
That I brought that professional experience into raising both of my sons who weren't my biological children and with my biological son. And so to less complicate what I'm trying to say is that I used everything that God gave me and put in my lap,
Right.
Thinking about all that I was given would be more than I was required to do, right?
Got it.
So I would use all of that to navigate my thinking along with my husband's experience in life in terms of his parenting, because he had been a parent before I was, right? So that was what we kind of used. So the sandwich really was almost, it was a blessing that we received a son like Kenneth, who had some great discipline in his life before he came to us.
Got it.
His mother was military as well. So she had raised him in kind of a military mindset. So he had some very diligent and disciplined ways of living himself by the time we got at 15. So
Right.
it wasn't like taking somebody completely off the street and they didn't have any type of cap or boundaries.
Right.
He had a lot of boundaries when we met him, when he came to our life. So that really helped. But taking his boundaries and matching them with our boundaries, and then expanding some of the boundaries that he was bound by and not free to be, that was the other area that we had to work on. So all of that. And then looking at my parents, how they raised me, and saying, if this worked for me, could it work for my son? Could it work for Kenneth? Could it work for my baby boy? Could it work for my older son? Those were all the questions I was asking the whole time. And then, again, kind of getting the support I needed from my husband with that. So it's a very deep question you just asked, and so I could be talking about this forever. But
Yes.
it really does make me think, wow, what were the real conscious efforts I made based on my parenting, based on how I was parented,
Right.
to raising my kids? It really does make you think about that.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you that, it's funny. So I believe God put you where you're supposed to be, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent,
Right.
and it's up to you to get past it. So it's funny because the movie theme of the last 3 weeks in this house has been my honor student son who went to just what the heck, dude, and having to literally cattle prod and micromanage everything. It's this weird dynamic.
Right.
And because I take care of my dad, I know how my dad raised me. And it's very odd that you can reflect and see okay, my parenting when it comes to being patient about this is very much like yours. So what my son's current academic look was pretty much me all the time. And I know how my father responded to that. And I find it amazing that you said that, though, because there's these core values or pillars that are instilled in you. And I think sometimes like involuntary muscles, you just naturally do what you're supposed to do. And so, I think I'm a pretty good dad in many categories. I think I'm a very bad dad with emotional intelligence, or my fear of, how do I say it? We always want our kids to be better than us. I believe that.
Absolutely.
Right. But I think the failure can come with me saying, but if you're just like me, you didn't succeed. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be better than I am, but you remind me of me, and that's not good. And I think that's a foul on my part, and so we've navigated through it, but it's tough. And I've had some very eye-opening moments. Not with my son when I'm talking to him, but more so when I go up to the bed and I reflect. And I'm gonna tell you, I think you did a fabulous job because the aura and energy you guys bring, that's so positive and very is very peaceful. Has always been in Kenny, except when he gets irritated.
100%.
Right? Yeah. Because I mean, he really has no fear. And he has good energy. And I guess does that tie into some core values that are highlighted in this book, like whether they're named or titled or not? Because we all have them, right? Like my dad's 3 of them were, for me, were like, don't drink, don't do drugs, and you don't hit women. I'm sorry, don't drink and drugs. That was 1. Don't hit women, and don't hate, like race, color. You know what I mean? Like love people. And I was a military brat too, and those are the 3 that always stuck with me.
Right.
And I've always been open-minded about everything. I don't care if you're black, white, yellow, orange, green, blue. I don't care. I personally, I don't care. I mean, if you want to get into religion and stuff like that, it's tad different. If you want to talk about like, the LGBTQ stuff and all that, that stuff don't bother me. Just don't hurt people, but there's got to be some serious gems in there. Because look, here we are once again, and I've only reconnected with so many people in the military. A lot of people come to Vegas. You wouldn't believe. I've actually had a few friends that have been on their 6th trip and I haven't seen them. Wow. And I said next trip, like, just lose my number. You know what I mean? And when you're a Vegas native, you want them to call you, but you really don't want to go out to the strip to see them. Right. So it's this really weird dynamic because, Vegas residents, they hate going to the strip and all that stuff because it's so busy. So anyways, all right, so those core values.
I started out, the first chapter was around me coming into this beautiful world with my dad actually being the person that, how do I say this? My father delivered me. Brought me into this world at a time where, again, being hot stopped by police officers because he was speeding to the hospital to get my mother and I there. And it could have turned out pretty bad based on him ignoring the red lights and, finally calling for more backup and finally getting pulled over and him really talking about, hey, my wife is scared to have a baby in the back seat. And before we knew it, there I was landed in my dad's arms,
Okay.
From there, it was this bond that he and I had. If I can fast forward, there's so much I want to say, so excuse my pausing here, but my father and I had this unspoken bond that never came to light or came to awareness by my siblings and even by other people until he got really sick near his end of his life, and he had Alzheimer's. And while he had, for the 6 years I took care of him when he was sick, he passed away because of COVID. So it was 6 years of Alzheimer's and then 7 days of COVID, and he's gone. But in that time period, we became so close, and there was so much that he shared with me and so much that we shared together. It was all wrapped around our core values that he taught us, that he landed from the very beginning with all the kids. He would say to us, never take more from society than you put in it. He commanded and demanded that we get a higher education because it was something that no one could take away from you.
Right.
He had such a strong feeling about us being respectful to one another first and foremost in our home. We couldn't call each other out of our name. We couldn't yell at each other. We couldn't do anything that was disrespectful to one another in the home, which then bled out into our community relationships and our work relationships and everything. He was very strong in providing, I should say, a church home for us, no matter where we went. Every station we had, while he was in the Air Force, we traveled every 2 years, right? He would always find a church home and always make sure that he was encouraging us to have a personal relationship with God. And that was really a part of who he was.
Right.
He had these core values that he would speak to us over and over and over again throughout our life. Some were very deep, like the ones I just shared. Others were that on a Saturday when it was just school was done and it was just rest time and relaxation time, TV time, he would tell us to get up and be productive. We couldn't just lay around the house. We had to find something productive to do. He'd always say, find a book to read or, do something, whether it was chores around the house, but we had to be doing something productive. And we struggled throughout our life to find out what met Dad's standard of productivity because we had to be doing something that kept us, and that's just how he was. So all of those values that he put into our core values, we lived with them wholeheartedly throughout our life. Didn't quite understand some of them as a young girl, but as I grew older, I got it. And as he got sicker and started losing more of his memory to life, it was amazing that those values never went away. He'd always be able to come back to them in the memory that he had left and how he taught us.
I have a huge question for you.
Yes.
Because my daughter and son have said I've never made them think I'm proud of them. And so it's funny you hit that note. They know I love them, but what I mean is you said that we never really quite understood what his level of being productive was. So I mean, I think there's always some level of ambiguity when you have I do apologize here. When you have a certain level of, you have a high standard, right?
Yeah.
And so how did you guys ever, what was the turning point where you're like, when was the aha moment with like, okay, this was his standard of, this is what he meant by being productive, or this is what really like he was trying to help us understand. Like for my son, and when I was talking about his grades, I said, it's not the grade I care about, it's the fact that you weren't proactive and you didn't go back to your teacher and try to resolve it, and you lost a lot of credibility in my eyes. You know what I mean? I said the F is one thing, but you can't fail in having good character in life.
Yeah, that's great.
Right, regardless of what you do, And so, did you ever feel like that? I mean, did you or your siblings ever think like, man, like Pops is like, man, I'm just trying to chill,
right?
And he's got me out here doing something all the time. Like, how do you how would you say now that you have all the answers, how do you navigate through that as a parent when you're just wanting the best for your kid, but they're not understanding that based on your approach?
I would love for my children to answer that for me because I feel like I do a lot of shadowing of my dad's, right? I don't feel like I've ever met that mark from my father. I felt like he's always said to us, when you're satisfied, you're dead. So keep working, keep doing, keep being, keep producing as long as you can. There were times when I knew that Dad was very proud of me, and then he would ask, what's next? What are you going to do next? Got it. Wasn't a time, I think, in my life that my father sat down and just said, oh, you guys you've done it. You met the mark. He'd always congratulate us, and he would, give a lot of, he would have a lot of pride behind his children and the things that they've done and how they made him feel as a father. But he was always pushing us, always wanting us to go to the next height. If we got our bachelor's, he'd say, when you get your master's? If you got your when you get your PhD? I mean, it was like, that's just who he was. He, even in his sickness, could not sit still, wanted to keep doing as much as he could. In fact, the day that we walked out of the hospital after his diagnosis, he looked at me and he said, let me do as much as I can until I can't do anymore. But don't take away what I have the ability to do while I can do it. There were times we knew Dad couldn't do things, and it was hard to say, well, you can't drive anymore, or you can't read that anymore, you can't understand that anymore. But he always still wanted, he still pushed himself right to the end, and he was the type of person that kept believing that you do everything you can while you can. Some of us can get complacent, and that wasn't part of his being. Yeah. I know this book is about my mother as well, but she's the one that really supported all that with my dad, even though she left us, passed away 20 years earlier. She was the same way. She just always supported Dad and whatever he wanted to do, and he gave her that ambition to live and push through life more than I think she was able to give herself. That's just who he was.
Man, I love it. Hey, you're supposed to be
Yeah, right.
co with me. So this is it actually would be a lot more interesting. I'm curious what you want to ask your mom that maybe you've never asked or discussed that ties into everything she's talked about, because there's something I can never understand. I can never, like, even, you know, right now, you know, when when George Floyd happened and we kind of went back into peeling back the layers. Even in the Air Force, they were talking about, you know, like punishments were unevenly distributed, you know, based on African American and, you know, and then they started going back to, you know, Hispanic, and most people don't even know my ethnicity, which I prefer. I'm just all mixed up.
Okay.
But I'm actually half Asian, but I'm just so big, people are like, no, you're not. And but you know what I experienced in life, the wounds are deep based on the PTSD stuff. But then I think about when you talked about your parents, and you're talking about the civil rights pivot, and we still got a long ways to go, but what I've experienced today is nowhere remotely close. And to me, to be able to maintain positivity and not let hate guide you.
Come on now. Yeah.
That's some incredible stuff right there that I don't even dare. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm a chief and, you know, I'm educated, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, nah, like, I worry about my kids walking over to the Chevron just because people don't know how to stop at red lights in Vegas.
That's right.
You know?
Right.
Not because someone's going to look at them and be like, oh, you know, look at the color of your skin, or like, I'm seeing I guess what I'm seeing is there's so much goodness to the fact that, you know, you can come up in a world that just everything is against you and you still persevered through it. And it didn't just impact one generation. It bled into another generation, and it bled into you, and you're not her son by blood.
Right. Right.
That's I mean, that's some serious love right there.
Right. Right.
You know? And I know that more than anything because my family's blended. You know, and it's, you know, when you're navigating a stepson versus your blood son, and you're trying to keep everything equal, and that's tough. But I think you owe your mom a question that she's probably never, ever heard from you. Or a compliment, or your dad too. Because I'm jealous. Look, I'm trying.
I actually did have a question, or at least something I wanted to state in regards to my parents. So, productivity. I think, much to my dad's dismay, my mother and I match productivity pretty well. We now know where she gets it from the very statements of her father saying, "What are you doing productive?" Where I got it from, I think the last time I mentioned this was at his funeral, so forgive me if I get emotional. But what I mentioned at the funeral was, it was my intent, and it continues to be my intent, to do what I can to ensure that I have that I'm worthy to be a McGee or to be a Burton. Now, that's not because anybody in the family, well, intricately and specifically said to me, KJ, you're gonna have to do these 300 things by this date, otherwise you suck, and we're not gonna really accept you around the family, you know, kind of thing. So no one said that to me. But for me, coming in at age 15 and realizing that we both know how group dynamics works, right? And transformation leadership, and, you know, and so just realizing how much I was gonna have to pour into them as much as I can. That's when all the little silly little things I used to do, which I still do, but I have a little bit more of a reason for it now. But, you know, I used to just sit there and gather all the names. I would ask Mom, I don't know all of them necessarily by name, but I'll just make sure I have them all. And I would ask Mom and Dad, what are all of the your siblings' names, all their kids, their spouses, obviously granddad, and then any cousins that I was missing. And I would sit down there and write Christmas cards. I would just piece of paper, back in the day when we wrote things and not typed them. And I would sit there during the holidays as everyone was up doing whatever around the house. I was in a corner somewhere writing letters to every single, of course, trying to do it semi-secretly because I didn't really want them to know what I was doing until I actually gave it to them. And then that's literally what I was doing for years, you know. And again, against Dad is like, have you ever got a letter back? But that came from is because I always wanted to be productive. And both of them would tell you, I've been working since I met them. Like whatever that meant, whether it was mowing lawns, whether it was, I didn't want them to pay me, but it was more so me doing things to be productive, to say, hey, I want to make sure that you realize I'm just going to sit here and receive food and board without some productivity for me, you know. So I'm always defending my brothers because of that. Because some of them is like, well, how come they're not doing that? Well, they're in the family, you know what I mean? So, I mean, they're good, you know, they shouldn't have to, you know, because that was, I won't say it was a planned, but you expected that. You had my little brother, right? My older brother came years and years before me. But you weren't expecting a 15-year-old who, by the way, is not, well, at that point, I had some lack of being extrovert. So I had a lot of more introvert in me than extrovert. But once that came out, then it was more like, okay, this guy wants to go on every field trip, and he's in every council and every club. And they let me do what I wanted to do for like a year and a half. And then after that, I had to hone down on grades. But every club, every council, every whatever, and they were like, let him do. Because if that's what's getting him through this time frame, because sophomore, junior year, yeah, guys, if you look at pictures and stuff and you see them, send it to me, because it probably ain't pretty. I don't send those out very often. That was a very not pretty, not as Christian. I probably cussed a lot, you know, during those years, because it was a very rough time frame. So for what I want to say to my parents on air is thank you for allowing me to have that process. I know where it comes from you, and I understand where it comes from my dad, because he has a very robust background as well, especially in the job that he used to have at the juvenile court school. I can't remember how to say it.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so
extenuation.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. So he dealt with basically kids who were either you make it here or you back in juvie, you know, kind of thing. And so he dealt with a lot of that. And so having that knowledge from both of my parents when I came in was probably the best thing that I needed. I needed a strong father figure because that had never happened before, you know. And I needed a strong mother figure because the one that I had was great, but it was broken, you know. Otherwise, I wouldn't have stayed as long if it were 100% horrible, right? Because like, well, was she really horrible? No, because I'm not 100% horrible when I came to their doorstep. So of course she wasn't 100% horrible. But there are things that were going on that could not make, like, the next phase could not occur, you know, because the next phase would have been somebody in cuffs and somebody not okay, you know. So I had to make that choice. And so I just think, but it's like you said, KJ, the generations have been blessed by the things that Willie McGee and my grandmother have been able to pour into my parents, my sister, and obviously vicariously into my father as well, and just into the family, to her siblings, who were, as we were discussing offline, are all successful people right now. Like they're jobs, careers, families. None of them has ended up in any horrible situation in regards to prison and, you know, been entangled in any legalities, nothing like that. All of them are and have been successful in whatever they have done. And it's because of the very famous words of my grandfather, you need to do something productive, you know, and that poured into me. When I saw Mom was doing it, I was like, well, I'm gonna keep doing it, you know. So I was part-time working, KJ, you know, while going to school, while involved in events, in and out of church. So I had church stuff going on, work going on, and then handling my studies all at the same time, all throughout most of my high school career. And then I obviously decided to do the Air Force. So I have great parenting, great grandparents, and that's, you know, these generations. And so my intent is to pay it forward, you know, and to adopt, so that I can pour that same generational blessing into the ones that come behind me.
Yeah, I would say that there's probably no greater dividends paid than like serving others, and you're leading by example for your family to see. There's always lots of room for helping others, you know. So I think kudos. That's pretty awesome. So are we allowed to embarrass him real quick before you go any further in your book?
Sure.
What? Yeah, like I just think there's got to be like the God bless his heart, like bless him. Like moments. I learned that from a chief, like when he was talking about one of his bad airmen, he was like, man, bless his heart, you know, like like, and maybe it goes back to that time, and I don't want to embarrass him, like, really.
No,
but,
yes, it's fine. It's
but
fine.
you know what I
I
mean?
have no
Like,
secrets.
I guess I use it as like, was there a time where you really had to dig deep into any of these pillars or core values, even just as a parent, not necessarily with Kenny or anything like that, where you've maybe felt like you were being tested or challenged, and how do you overcome that? Because I think that's something that a lot of us, you know, like even you when you're dealing with youth, you know what I mean? You may deal with the same problem 100 times, but that 101st time, you're like, okay, man, this kid's not getting it. You know,
Well,
The
we had
silent
those
grin
moments.
for Mike.
yeah,
We did. And my husband can back me up on this. Kenneth is very stubborn, and he's very strong-willed. Now, on one end, being strong-willed and being stubborn are both opposite ends of the spectrum for Kenneth, because I see that his strong will got him to the point where he knocked on our door and said, I can't do it anymore with my mother. We met in high school. I was working at the high school that he was going to, and that's how Kenneth and I met. And I was running a club, a human relations club on campus, and he was in that club. And looking for some extra things to do at the end of the day to avoid going home. And he would always volunteer to work with me to do things, make posters or get things set up for the next event that we were going to be doing. And that's how he got to know us. And so by him getting to know us and knowing my son, who was over the Black American Culture Club at the time at the school, and he was a part of that. So he got to know my son, he got to know me, and there was something that he knew was solid in that relationship. And so when he was going through what he was going, which I had no aware of, we had just gotten back off vacation one summer, and we could barely get our luggage on the door, and he had luggage his own and knocking on our door and saying, I need to come live with you guys, and I'm not doing this with my mother anymore. It's like, okay, I'm Miss Burton, and I work at that school, and I can't just take in a random youth into my home, right? You need to go back home, and we'll call the police, and we'll have them do some investigation and find out what's going on. Long story short, I sent him home. An hour later, he was back at my door. I said, okay, so that's that strong will / stubbornness, right? Didn't I just tell you to go home?
Yeah.
But he knew he had that strong will and that stubbornness that worked to his benefit at the end, right?
Right.
So fast forward, after going through all the legal process of getting Kenneth into our home and being foster parents for him and all that, because the situation was very dire, what he was going through, there were times when he would be so animate about being involved and doing things that it took away from his own self-care. You know, his self-care was not happening, and I was noticing he was running himself down, and he was just going. And no matter what we said to him, like, Kenneth, do you really need to join another club? Do you really need to do another this? Do you really need to volunteer for another that? You know, your day is full. And we would kind of go back and forth. My husband and I were just like, this kid is just, he's going. And my other sons were like, chill, you know? It's like, and so there was a day then I said, how do I parent him to help him understand what he is doing and how he can be productive in a different way?
Got it.
Sat him down and said, I need you to list everything that you're involved in school. And after his list ran off the edge of the paper, I said, okay, so now let's pick 5 things or 6 things, whatever, that you can do that makes sense for you to do right now, because you got to graduate from school and you're taking too much energy toward that. Let's put more energy toward where you want to go after you leave this household or after you graduate. So we looked at that strategically. And that was one of those things where it was so hard for him. I watched him sweat bullets trying to scratch off one of these things that he didn't want to take off the list. But when he got through it, it was really,
I can feel the sweat.
Yeah. When we got through it, he then took a deep breath and said, okay, this is something I can manage and feel good about doing. But it was strategic parenting at that point versus just saying, you're not going to go there, you're not going to do that, you're not going to do that. It was helping him understand and helping him make that decision and walk alongside him so that he would feel good about that. That was what my father and my mother would do for me. And I knew that came straight from some of the parenting that my parents gave me, helping me make those decisions with them.
Your dad wanted you to be productive. So it sounds like to me, was he more of like, as long as you're being productive, let him run? Like, go be productive, but just be productive. Or was there kind of like, well, no, I want you to be a little more productive this way? And I ask that because when Kenny started working for me, and I don't know if did he always do he has a mannerism when he Was that a phone? Oh, no, it's okay. It's
I
okay.
forgot to mute that. I'm
No,
so
it's all
sorry.
right. You should answer it. Hello. Welcome.
Sorry, I apologize.
Oh, no. This,
Okay.
We
right.
had a, I'll see, I better stop. I was going to tell you a story, but then I'll forget what I was going to ask you.
Okay. When my father,
So was he the type to, well, you said strategic parenting, and like, so when I met Kenny, what I saw in him was like, look, this guy don't like to be controlled. He's going to flourish if I let him run.
right.
Right. And then I would kind of give him some guidance and some ideas, and then he would run with it. So does that sound about right? Like with how your dad parented, as far as like, look, I just want you to be productive. Or was it, I want you to be productive, but Cynthia, I want you to be productive in like academics or this? Or was it just like, nah, look, the world is your oyster. Just be doing something.
No, he was very strategic. He was very opinionated. That if I'll go for the example of me going to get my degree in behavioral science, and he sat me down and said, why would you want to get a degree working with humans? They're just so unpredictable. Being an engineer,
Right.
working on machines, he said, I could tell the machine, or I can work a machine, I can know I had that control. You don't have control over humans. Why would you want to get a job like that? Why would you want to get an education like that? Why don't you go learn how to do computers or learn how to do this? And it's like, Dad, that's not how I'm wired. That's not how I'm wired. And so he would definitely put his request in, and then he would say, okay, that's what you want to do. But he would challenge us on that. He would challenge all of us on, is that going to make you money? Is that going to help you be able to take care of yourself? How are you going to grow and move beyond that? And what are you going to do with that degree if you get that? I mean, that was kind of how he was. But be productive in that. And then when he saw it working for the benefit of us, of ourselves, for ourselves and our family, he was okay, good choice. But he made you think. He made you think always about, I remember the day that I asked him, and it's in the book, if I could date. I was 18 years old, and I was the first daughter, so he was very restricted with me and everything. And I said, Dad, do you think can I date? And he said, well, why do you want to date? And I said, well, everybody else is my age. And he said, so if everybody else your age was jumping off a cliff, would you want to jump?
They all jump off the cliff.
Right. They all jump off the cliff. And I said, well, no. And he said, well, when you have a better answer to that question, we could talk about that. And that was the end of that conversation.
Oh my gosh. My answer would have been like, no.
Right.
At 18.
No.
At 18, right?
Well, now I feel safe. So of the 6 kids, there's only one girl, and she's right in the middle.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm like, oh boy, I really feel bad for the guy who does.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a kung fu video game.
Right.
Like
Got these layers.
except I'm level 1 because I'm
Right.
old. So I'm the easy guy to beat. Okay, that is fantastic. Man, I had a following question, and it literally slipped my mind.
Well, in that, I realized as I got older that Dad just wasn't ready for me to date. He didn't want to tell me no, because I'm scared. I don't want anybody, I don't want anybody with my baby girl, and all this. So, but he really made me think about the reason why dating was important for me at that time. And not following, he always told us to, pave our own path. Don't just follow everything everybody else is doing. So it made me think about, made me really think about dating in different ways than my peers did.
Right.
So, yeah.
So was there, your husband's a big guy. So was there reasons, was there reasons other than just because everybody was, or was there like something that caught your eye, or... Am I allowed to ask that?
Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
It really was peer pressure.
Got it.
I wanted to be liked, and I wanted to have fun. I wanted to go out with the girls and the guys that were having dates, and so I just wanted to do it because everybody else. It was a fun thing to do. It was time. I was 18 years old. I mean, I was just at that age where I was like, okay, let's explore this part. But it wasn't that I sat down one day and said, I'm in love with this person and I want to date this person and have a future with this person. It was just like, oh, dating seems to be the thing I'm supposed to do. I'm 18. I guess I better do that now. It was
True.
just kind of, and he knew. My father knew that I wasn't that type of. I was always a little behind my peers in terms of socialization, in terms of getting out there and doing the things that they did. But for him, it's like, if this girl's ready, then she's gonna have to tell me why. And I didn't have an answer for him.
And where was this at?
Where was what at?
Where was this at when you were 18 and you were?
I was living in El Cajon, California.
Okay. You said Elkhorn?
El Cajon, Elcajon.
Is that Southern Cal or?
It is.
Yes.
That's Southern California.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about 15 minutes outside of San Diego.
Okay.
East, going east.
We're from Sacramento,
Oh, okay.
right?
Okay,
So,
yeah.
but I've disowned California now. So,
Okay.
yeah,
That's another podcast.
that is definitely another podcast. Nevada's not much better. No, actually, when we got here, it really boiled down to an Air Force retirement and where does it go further? There's no state tax here. For the property size, you get a lot more than in California. And, you can be in North Vegas going to Walmart. This is like how I like to dress anyways all the time, especially now that I'm retired. I don't care. Or you can put all your Gucci and Louis Vuitton or whatever and go out to the Strip and feel like you're like in Hollywood and come right back to reality.
Yeah.
And then, Salt Lake City is just 5 hours down the way. In Mount Charleston, it snows. And so you kind of got a little bit of everything minus this heat in the summer. So back to your book, what's your favorite part? And I thought you put a bookmark in there. Was that to reference something specifically?
No, it
Okay.
was. I was looking for the card that I wanted to give you. That's why I want to make sure it was in here. So I just want to give you that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts in the book, and we haven't talked much about my mother, who was absolutely a gem that God blessed us with. One of my favorite parts was when we had a conversation. She was dealing with some medical issues when she was younger. In the earlier part of her marriage. I was just 7 years old, and she gave me an opportunity to understand what caretaking really is about. And she called me into the room and told me about her condition, and really gave me permission to love her in a way that was different from the way my siblings understood how to love a mother who was dealing with a medical condition.
Got it.
And I lived my life for as long. So I was 43 years old when she passed away at 63. Those years that I had to love her based on the fact that I knew the moment she felt most vulnerable to be a parent, to be a mother to me, she leaned into me and said, "I need your help."
Got
At
it.
7 years old. And as I grew up and she grew into understanding her medical condition more and dealing with it more, it just was a bond that was just unbreakable. And I'm not taking anything away from my siblings or what they have from
Right.
her, but it was very special. That moment when I recounted that in the book, I mean, I literally cried all the way through that chapter, just thinking about how much strength she had to have as a mother to tell her 7-year-old, hey, I need help. I need help. I need your help. I had a baby sister right after a year or so, less than a year or so after her condition happened, and that I had to take care of my baby sister because my mother couldn't, but it was the best thing the doctor said for her to do at that time was to have another child, because this was going to help her come out of her depression and help her deal with, her condition. And I was a critical part of that, just leaning into that. So that was, I can't imagine what I would have felt at her age with my 7-year-old child, male or female, leaning into them and saying, "Hey, there's some things I can't do anymore as your mother, and I'm going to need your help." And Daddy was so, engrossed in his military responsibilities. We were moving a lot, and there was a lot of things that, sometimes he would have his TDY stations. He'd go off and come back in 6 months. We'd be there at the house taking care of Mom and doing all that. And Dad was just, he depended on her. Dad depended on me to be there for Mother more than any other sibling. So that was one of my most favorite parts in the book. And then the other favorite part was just the moment that my father sat down with me and talked to me about moving out when I was ready to move out, and gave me a hard lesson about moving out. And I thought he was crazy at the time when he talked to me the way he did about me moving out, but he basically said, just remember, if you're choosing to go now, can't come back. And it's like, why would you tell? I was 18 years old. I was actually, going into my 19th birthday, and I said, "Dad, I'm ready to move out." And he's like, "Well, why?" And I had the answers for him. I was ready to be my own woman. I was ready to my own place. I was ready to do my own thing. I didn't want to live under your roof with the strict requirements of being in education. We had to always have A's or B's. We couldn't bring a C home, and he was very strict about education. And I was just like done. I was like, I don't want to live like that. I want to just kind of do my own thing. I want my own dishes to wash. I don't want to wash your mom's dishes. I mean, it was that that simple. And when he said to me, well, if you go, you can't come back. It's like, why would he say that? But he gave me this ideal of, if you're going to make it, make it.
Oh.
Don't think that this is a door swinging both ways all your life. Think about making it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was the message I got. When I moved out, I realized I got to make it because I can't come back home. And literally, I could have, but he didn't make it sound like that. He did not make it sound like that. But I never went back.
Sounds like a military dad to me.
Military dad. I mean, he was such a military dad.
Yeah, when I don't speak very kindly, when I'm upset, my dad's like, "Oh, okay, chief."
Right.
I was like, "Well, I did outrank you, Dad." So
Right.
I did.
But the book is also filled with some fun stories. They're hilarious stories of me and my siblings growing up together, Dad and Mom supporting us through silly events and things that we went through, and how they helped us when we were going through helped me, I should say, when I was going through very, very challenging times during racism and discrimination in school, and how Dad really helped me understand what it was like to, well, let me put this disclaimer out. I was a fighter growing up. I was the one in the family that would fight physically when someone challenged my family or my siblings or myself. And after so many trips back and forth to the principal's office and all that, by the time I got to 10th grade, my father came in, and he would always come to school when they would call him in his Air Force uniform, which just gave me such, I don't know what I thought he was. He was just such an amazing man. He's 6'4" plus feet tall, and walking in his
superhero.
The uniforms make
superhero. He
us
was my
look
superhero.
bigger
Yes.
than we are.
He was my Captain America. But when he came in his uniform, in his Air Force uniform, and I would just sit there knowing that I had done something wrong, but just would wait for what Dad's response would be to these people that I felt that they were wrong, and he was going to protect his daughter and all this. And when I was in 10th grade, he finally said to me, "Cynthia, you're going to have to stop being so aggressive and learn how to be assertive." And I said, "Dad, what does assertive mean?" Now, Daddy was a person that was very critical about language, and he would always tell us, look it up in the dictionary. He had dictionaries all over the house. He'd say, if we didn't understand a word, he'd go, look it up, and we'd run to the dictionary and look it up. So when I got home, I looked up the word assertive, and I liked what it said. And that day changed my life. I moved from being so aggressive to an assertive woman. And he said, when you grow up, you're going to have to realize you got 3 strikes against you. 1 is that you're black, 2 is that you're a woman, and 3rd is that you're McGee, and you're going to have to live up to that standard. And that changed my life.
That is huge. We talk about that in family, legacy.
Legacy.
Mm-hmm. Legacy, and what are you going to leave behind, and how will you represent the family? I don't think we talk about that enough in today's world, like the family name and what it's supposed to mean and represent. It to me, it meant a lot more, a long time ago, generationally. I'm going to be honest with you, like I'm curious to see where we're going. I don't know. You know what I mean? Mm. I mean, we're either going to a zombie apocalypse or something, but like the values that we used to have growing up, it doesn't seem like it really is that significant anymore today. I talked about how, you said you had to go get a dictionary. Mm-hmm. Well, every kid nowadays walks around with a computer in their pocket. Yep. And every parent is being challenged based on their experience and wisdom because some YouTube influencer is out there being a clown. Mm-hmm. Because when I started this, they're like, dude, everybody's doing a podcast on leadership and inspiration and X, Y, and Z. And they're like, you're going to have to find something that's a little more, and I said, yeah, but I won't compromise my character, who I am. You know what I mean? I was like, I actually already am, because I was so afraid of when I was me and being me, it would turn off people.
Wow.
And plus I was still so institutionalized, almost 3 decades of being in the Air Force, and then you're a chief. The expectation is like, so that's who you had in the Air Force as a chief. And now he's retired and he's got his hair braided and, and blah, blah, blah. And I was balancing that with, as you probably know, like, if you listen to your wife, you make it a lot further than the younger version of me who was always like, no, 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 no. So, my wife was like, that's not a way to behave. So in my marriage, my wife is probably more like your dad, like, like stop acting like a child, and I told my wife when we first met, it's like, I spent years being told what to do. I said, I joined the Air Force when I was 17, here I am at 46, and you think I'm going to just let people tell me what to do anymore? Right. I was like, oh no. And I realized I'm very comfortable with that, but I had to have my moment of feeling like, I could just be whatever I wanted, realizing like, yeah, that's not me. That's not me. That's not me. And like I said, before you came here, I hadn't built no content in over a month, because it just wasn't that important based on what was going on. Right. New prescription drugs that I didn't realize for pain management was also an antidepressant. But I was like, how come I'm not able to wake up, So, and can't even tell you, like in the last 20 years, I haven't missed a day of the gym, and I've missed 5 in the last month. And didn't even care. Normally, I'd be like, "Oh no, I'm going."
Oh yeah.
Wow.
He'll tell you, I'm usually a 2 or 3 a day guy.
Yep.
Well, that's the way my husband was when I met him.
Yeah, and I would miss a day, and my wife would be like, "I can't believe you took a day off." I'm like, "Nah, I'm good, but I'm gonna go eat some ice cream." So, so believe it or not, one thing that I haven't touched on, and then we will CB give you one exit. Like I will pose one question to you, right? Because we got all this, and you're not scared. Like you dealt with juveniles, and that's tough. Because one time I was going to go into the criminal justice system, and everybody was like, "Dude, don't work with the juveniles because it's more accusatory and they're minors." And they're like, yeah, you can't buck up on them if they spit on you or do something because they're minors. They're like, go to the adult population. They're like, because then, you can defend. I don't know. Maybe you can be like, no, that's not true. But the COs that I all knew, they all said that. I was stationed at Vandenberg where Lompoc is connected and my buddy's a correctional officer in Florida and stuff right now, and one in Ohio. But I've heard a lot of great reasons why people should read this. But I think we have to foot stomp it though. Because I heard perseverance, I heard resiliency, I heard love, I heard parenting. And it sounds like a lot of stuff right now, especially what you saw during COVID, before COVID, that people need. Like, who's your target audience? Why should they read that? Does that make sense? I mean, besides the fact that you're awesome and we couldn't record it. I mean, she's literally 25, right?
That's it.
See, I mean that like one thing I've never done good in my podcast is communicated the why. You know what I mean? And so what was your why? Like what was the powerhouse that drove you to write this so the audience can connect? And obviously when we publish it and we put your information out there, we wanted to, sell and do well, not necessarily because of the money. For Kevin James, it might be, but for you, it might be like, look, there's knowledge and wisdom that needs to be passed on from lessons learned. And I feel like we're entering an era where we need more love and we need more people who can connect with what you and then your family experienced, especially as we get into a world where everybody wants to just default to this.
Right. Oh yeah.
So that's my question. Why? What was the why, and what is it that the readers can look to get out of this?
2 whys. We're all on this journey called life together, right? There's moments where, and I talk a lot about this in my book, about we pack our bags for expected and unexpected times of traveling through this life together.
Right.
I shared stories that were happy, sad, and indifferent stories about things I packed in my bag to help me make it through life. And there are times when I had to take a layover. There are times I had to stop cold and open up that bag and pull out one of those lessons to help me make it through the next day, the next moment, And so this journey that we're on, I think it's important, especially through what we're going through with COVID and everything. People have had to sit in their families, sit with one another and learn more about each other during this COVID period than we ever would have had a chance to if we had just kept going the way life was going for us. So there's a lot of reflection time that happened, and I'm hoping and praying that somebody would want to look at how to reflect on the love, the care, the lessons, the voices that we hear just within our family unit. Because the Bible talks about charity starting at home. Whatever we gather at home around the dinner table that we were forced to be there because of COVID, if we're not taking that out and doing something with it productively, right? If we're not looking at that and saying, I spent a whole year eating dinner with my husband that I didn't get a chance to because he worked night shifts, and now he's home every night with me, or with my children who were involved in sports, or with my parents, raising my parents now and seeing that. And there's a lot of reflective moments that we have, and I think it's important to look at that journey that we have been on and continue, and how we're going to bless other people with what we've learned. And secondly, it's important for children, and I don't mean children as in age, but children as in biological human beings that we have and or people that we bring into our home. How are we going to teach them, or this is a way to teach them on ways that they can think about their own parenting skills, their own things that they are consciously and unconsciously saying and doing to our children. I work with a lot of families. That's the job that I just retired out of doing with juvenile court community schools, and there were a lot of broken families. There were a lot of issues that were going on that caused their kids to be locked up and taken away, and parents even to be locked up and taken away. And we don't often get a chance to come back and share what we could have done differently, what we're going to do differently moving forward, how we're going to heal just even our core family to help them move to the next level.
Right.
And when they go out, when your kids say, goodbye, Daddy, I'm going out to deal my own world out here, that hopefully they're taking that core part of you with them, and they're going to make the world better, not worse, because of what you gave them.
Right.
And that is what I wanted to really share, that for every difficult and fun time that I had, I purposely looked at how I was going to make my society, my family better because of it, and not worse. Because there's some really hard stories in here dealing with being the only black family and communities in my school that were hard times, and my parents allowed me to figure out how I was going to still make society better, not worse, because of what I carried in my heart and my mind about that experience. So from your relationship, your communication with your wife, to your children's, to your grandchildren, to whoever that is, this book gives a reason to say there's a grounding place that everybody can be in their life. We have some horrible parents out there, some really bad parents out there.
Yep.
We have some really hard kids to raise, and that we are raising. There's a lot of situations that are out there right now that are causing people to give up on family unit. They're just saying, you go live with your uncle, go live with your auntie, I can't do this anymore. And they give up on keeping that core family unit together. And we need to come back to that. And we've been forced to come back to that based on COVID. Right. And if we're being forced to come back to it, then what are we going to do with that? When we open up again as a society, what's going to happen with all those sometimes very ugly moments we had living together for a whole year? Being shut down? Or, is there's some good things that came out of that? If you can pull out the good things, then share that. And that's what I try to do here. Yeah,
everybody keeps deferring back to how the Roaring '20s happened after pandemic.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you said, because I think it's spot on, and I've said this actually to someone else. So, and I'm going to talk about the George Floyd incident. So can you say I'm very active on my social media, and I like to post. I'll post anything, but I don't post hate. It's usually about family, leadership, or something that's kind of more funny. And I wasn't, I didn't go out there and, to me, what I call stir the pot and just throw these, these memes out there. And so I had, actually, it was funny. It was one of my subordinates who was like, silence. She said, silence is violence, and I can't believe you didn't share your perspective on this, because I know you don't support it. And I said, I don't need to go out on social media and share my perspective. I said, what I have to do, and I said, this is what I would encourage you to do, since you are picking and choosing what you see on my social media. I said, I want you to go back in my pictures, and I want you to see how I raise my children. I said, don't worry about what I post as far as like this is BS. I said, because I can't speak on something that is still under investigation. I said, and plus I said, even if it was 100% right, that's still not making the situation better. I was like, I don't think posting on social media makes our society problems better.
Right.
I think it makes it worse. I said, why don't you get out from behind your computer and go do something? I said, but since you want to look, I said, go back and look how I raised my kids. And then you will see that I raised my kids to love everybody. We have diverse friends and families. I was like, everything that you see now was taught at some point in life. And usually I believe from the family unit. You know, it was something ingrained that this type of behavior was acceptable, or maybe parents were forced to go work. I mean, at the end of the day, who can speak on the thousands and thousands of potential reasons why a young person grew up, especially because if you believe in like Maslow, right? Right. So if you believe in Maslow, there's thousands of reasons why a young human being never reaches a point of self-esteem because they don't have security, they don't have a sense of belonging, they never even had food or water, or, you know. And I said, so who am I to throw some statement out there that only, you know, shakes the beehive? Versus I was like, no, I'll just be quiet and I'll continue to do what I do, and I'll continue to serve my community and continue to raise my kids the right way, and I'll continue to do my podcast and do my best to be a good human being. And I think a lot of what I was just saying is in there. And so for those listening, I'm gonna put it out in the. Do you want to say it? Do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to?
No, you can do that. I also want to, as you put this out there, to every young person that is out there that might be listening to this and will listen to this. There is an adult in your life, whether it be your parent, biologically, or someone that has come into your life that has influenced you and given you something that you can think positively about yourself and others. And whoever that adult is, take heed to that. Share that part of that person that's in you with others, because that's the only way we're going to make this world a better place. That hopefully you'll be able to do the same when you get older, that you'll be able to share a part of you to the world that will make someone think and feel differently about the space and place that they're in. And that's my reason for putting this out there. Both my parents are gone now. They are in heaven together. I miss them dearly. There were times when I was very upset with Dad because he was so strict, and I was hurting for my mother. You know, we weren't the perfect family, but we were the perfect family in love with one another. So I want you to find peace with somebody, because a lot of times people say, well, that was her family, and that's how the McGees were. But there's family, young people find family in gangs. They find family, right? They find family at churches. They find family at clubs, social clubs out there in the world. But whoever your family is, if you can't pull something great and promising and forward moving out of that family, then you're probably not in the right space. But you got to find something that makes you feel better about life itself and people that you put around you, that you go to. And whoever that is, take that and then share it with the world, because that's the only way we're going to make this world better. And I want people to know that. This is what this book is about, too. I want to share what my parents put in me, that I chose to make my space, my place, my experience, my journey in this world better.
I love it. So for those listening, the book is called A Phenomenal Journey. Cynthia McGee Burton. Make sure you pick it up. So before we wrap up, like that was actually the wrap up, right? But we should put CB on the spot, right? So no wonder you're in love with this woman and been married for so long, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So let's make sure you get some mic time real quick, right? So what did you think about all this? How how is it? Do you support so well? Like she's writing? Do you give her feedback? Has it all just been? The floor is yours. Because
here's how it goes. From day one, since we've been together, I saw this phenomenal woman,
right?
And whatever she wanted to do, it's always I wanted to be in the background to support that. I saw her drive. I said this the other night. I saw, how aggressive she would be in not trying to accomplish, but accomplishing anything she set her mind, her pen, her hand to do. So in that, if he passed me an idea, say, I want to do this. Okay, well, how can I help you do it?
Right.
How can I help you accomplish that? See, like, I'm long-winded, but when I watch her, so I had to shut up, and go in the background, not to overtake some things,
Right.
But with my wife, it's easy, to support what she does because she has such a drive, and one to help others and to share, in
Right.
helping others, so it makes it easy. So just pass me an idea. If you want to go with that, I'm in support. Plain and simple.
I love it. Because, that's why, that's kind of like going with this. I was like, what kind of selfish person is been blessed with a life, go to combat, come back, get education, and then just rides off into the sunset and doesn't find a way to communicate to someone out there? Because, I learned when I was a social worker in the Air Force, we measure success too much based off of, I use baseball stats versus basketball, right? I was like, in baseball, if you hit the ball 3 times out of 10, you're probably a Hall of Fame hitter.
Yes, sir.
Right. But if you shoot free throws like Shaq, you get made fun of. And too many times we measure the success in the social world or the resiliency world or connecting with someone based off of like Shaquille O'Neal throwing free throws. So we're like, oh my gosh, if I didn't connect with 9 out of 10 and save 9 out of 10 people, I failed. And I had to learn that. I'm like, man, of the 10 people I talked to, if one listened,
There you go.
and that's why, we do what we do. I too am long-winded. My wife actually says after about 5 minutes, she just starts feeling sorry for me. So she just agrees with whatever I'm ranting about. Cause I just keep going and going and I just over-explain myself. That is a bad habit of mine. And I would hope that you would support, because we don't like to be selective, because she found a great man, right? That's why I tell my wife, I'm like, you picked me, so you definitely know what you're doing.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm going to support you in whatever you want. And actually, my wife listens. She's my biggest fan, and she listens to all this, and she gives me feedback, and I have to walk out of the room and pace a little bit. But, I'm like, that's what I would call my ride or die.
Yes, sir.
And I love her to death. And I appreciate you guys coming and joining. I really, really apologize for how warm it is in here. But we got through it. And we can head inside and where it's a little more air conditioned. So KJ2, right? This is the first ever anyone coming from outside and joining me in the studio. So this is a first.
Okay.
I appreciate all of you. I appreciate you bringing your family.
Absolutely.
And your family, it's a blessing for you guys to be in our home. But I will let you take us out. You know what I mean? And you got a DJ voice anyways, a lot better than mine. So why don't you take us out, and I will hit this stop recording when you point to me and say that's a wrap.
All right. Well, it took no hesitation from me to, of course, connect the two dots. One thing I always tell my parents is I just love bringing great people together, right? So just knowing that I could have you guys meet with the original KJ, and I did tell them that, by the way, before I came here. I'm gonna make sure I said that on the air, that the original KJ is the lead KJ. I'm just KJ2. But with that, it's because the 3 people in this room, for those who are listening, have been 3 of the most influential members in my life. So I hope, one, that you keep listening to Kicking It with KJ. Hear his podcast. They're always really, really great and honorable and leadership type deals. I love his stuff that he posts online as well on Facebook, so I always follow that. And of course, I would do anything I can to support him. And with my parents and my mother, of course, with her book, again, like it's been said, please pick it up. A Phenomenal Journey. It's on Amazon. You can find it real easy, and just support what you can. But for those who are listening, it's going to be a great seed to put into those around you and into yourself in regards to how you can develop yourself despite the many things that are happening around the world. And so I'm just continue to be encouraged, and I just hope to continue to be in a seat where I can support them going forward. So with that, that's all I got, and I guess we're going to be
we're going to wrap it up, man.
Yeah. So
generational knowledge. Slow motion is better than no motion. Thanks, guys, for coming.